Hello, my name is Roland Ort and I work at the faculty of TPM of the University of Technology in Delft. In this lecture, we focus on the topic management of innovation and entrepreneurship. The main message is that in order to be able to manage innovation and to act as an entrepreneur, it is required to look at the innovation and subsequent diffusion process. Or, to put it differently, it is not possible to manage a process without understanding that very process. The learning goal of this lecture is that the way innovation has to be managed and the way entrepreneurship enters the process strongly depends on the perspective on innovation and subsequent diffusion process. We will distinguish two different perspectives on this innovation and diffusion process. Then we will look at the management competences required. We will conclude and discuss implications for responsible innovation. In the previous lectures, different types of innovations are distinguished. In this lecture, we will particularly focus on product innovations that are technology-based, and we will look at the management and entrepreneurship in innovation and subsequent diffusion processes from the perspective of a company. Examples of technology-based product innovations from history are communication appliances, such as telephony and television, materials, such as Kevlar or Glare, and medicines, such as Prozac or aspirin. At the time of their introduction, these were radically new technology-based innovations. Two perspectives on innovation and diffusion processes can be distinguished. In the first perspective, the innovation process is seen as a project, a new product development project, that starts when a new technology is available. That project ends when a new product, its production and its marketing, are prepared and ready. After the project, there is a market introduction and then diffusion starts. You can see this process on the slide. In this perspective, on the innovation and diffusion process, different types of management are required to complete this process successfully. R&D management is required to develop the technology, and R&D is involved in the subsequent product development project. Project management is required to manage the new product development project. Marketing management is required to prepare the market introduction plan and manage the subsequent diffusion process. You can see the management contribution during the process of innovation and diffusion on the slide. From the 1980s on, mainstream innovation management handbooks presented innovation as a project. In this perspective, the management efforts require close marketing and R&D interaction. It depends on the type of company and the industry which discipline is in the lead, marketing or R&D, and that leading department usually provides the project manager. The success of these joint efforts is reflected in a large increase of sales or in a steep diffusion curve after introduction. In the innovation management literature, you can find a considerable body of knowledge on a so-called marketing R&D interface. This is a literature that started in the 1980s and continued until the turn of the 21st century. If you track the diffusion of telephones and televisions, for example, you will find an almost perfectly shaped diffusion curve. Indeed, these products were quite successful in the market. In the second perspective, the innovation process is not seen as just one new product development project. This perspective claims that the process is more complex. I will distinguish four aspects that make innovation more complex than just a product development project. You can see these aspects on this slide. Firstly, technology development and product development proceed in parallel. Usually, the first products are unreliable and technology needs to be developed further to enable the development of reliable products. Jointly developing a product and the required technology is not just one project, but resembles more a complex program of highly related and therefore iterative projects. Secondly, many companies or networks of companies compete with each other by working in parallel on technology and product development. Sometimes findings are patented and then used by other consortia or networks of companies. In that case, the innovation process is not just a project. In the era of open innovation, innovation is an interlinked process of many separate projects. A third reason why the innovation process is not just a project is that the product cannot just be introduced. The market initially usually lacks all types of complementary products and services, for example, an infrastructure. Sometimes production facilities are not yet available. For example, materials such as nylon and strong fibers such as Dyneema were developed before their large-scale production was possible. Sometimes consumers do not understand the product. As a result of all the elements that lack, the market introduction becomes a bit of a trial and error process in which development proceeds while the product already diffuses in the market. So market development and product and technology development proceed in parallel. At last, sometimes the basic scientific principle explaining the working of a technology becomes clear after the technology is successfully deployed for years. For example, sailboats were built for thousands of years before we understood the scientific principles that enabled their movement. Airplanes were used for years before we understood the principles that mastered their flight. Let us focus on what actually happened in a typical historical case. Condense that in an innovation and diffusion process and then conclude what that implies for the types of management and entrepreneurship that are required to complete these processes successfully. The invention of the principal technology to enable television can be dated between 1925 and 1930. Instead of the start of a product development project, it took almost a decade before the first televisions were introduced in the market. Apparently, it takes a couple of years, on average a decade, to turn an invention in the first product. This is the first so-called innovation phase in the process of innovation and diffusion. The television was not introduced as the appliance as we know it right now. At first, televisions in the UK and Germany were introduced around 1939 as a kind of semi-public service for bars. Instead of large-scale diffusion, after the market introduction, small-scale diffusion in specific niches could be seen. A similar pattern of diffusion can be found for almost all radically new high-tech product innovations. This phase of subsequent small-scale diffusion of different product versions in small market niches is referred to as the adaptation phase. Finally, from the 1950s on, so more than 20 years after the invention, large-scale diffusion of televisions started. This phase is referred to as the stabilization phase. In fact, after analyzing the innovation and diffusion of more than 100 cases of radically new high-tech products introduced between 1850 and 2000, I do conclude that the television is a typical and average case in terms of the time between invention and large-scale diffusion. You can see the resulting process on the slide. In this perspective on the innovation and diffusion process, different types of management are required to complete this process successfully. On top of the R&D management, project management, and marketing management competences, new types of competences are required. Firstly, companies need to be oriented more externally to align development processes of products with related technology development processes and related development processes of complementary products and services, usually taking place at other companies. This external orientation is also required to track technology and product development activities by other companies and to track market developments. Secondly, entrepreneurial competences are required to develop a market. The second, or adaptation phase, is the phase in which many companies go bankrupt or leave the market before they crash and burn. entrepreneurs are required to envision the type of product, combining the technology with a latent market need, and designing a product that fulfills that need and create a business model to make money when commercializing the product. They decide when to introduce the innovation, the timing of entry. They decide where to introduce the innovation, in other words, the niche strategy. You can see the management contribution during the process of innovation and diffusion on this slide. Just to conclude, this lecture showed that the innovation process can be seen in different ways. The management of that process changes accordingly. The innovation process can be seen as a new product development project, after which the product is introduced in the market and diffuses. This requires R&D management, project management, and marketing management skills. The success of the process is assessed in terms of large-scale diffusion. The innovation process can also be seen as a long-term process of innovation and diffusion in which the technology is improved while subsequent product versions are introduced in different market niches until a mainstream product starts to diffuse on a large scale. On top of the management competences mentioned before, this process requires an external orientation to align activities of a company with many other companies, and it requires entrepreneurial skills and visioning how new technological functionalities can be turned into products that serve latent market needs, and envisioning how subsequent market products can be introduced in market niches to pave the way for large-scale diffusion. The second perspective has implications for responsible innovation. And the adaptation phase, the experimental and entrepreneurial phase in which several product versions are introduced in multiple market niches, accidents can happen and unexpected buy effects can emerge. A responsible approach is required here. The mainstream application in the stabilization phase is sometimes hard to predict, and so are the consequences of the use of the product in this application. Again, responsibility is required here. That was it. Thank you for your attention.